The Institute of Internal Auditors presents All Things Internal Audit Tech. In this episode, Robert Findlay talks with Lynn Moehl about the evolving role of data analytics and AI in internal auditing. Findlay shares strategies for overcoming challenges, best practices for integrating data analytics, use cases, and the importance of clear communication with stakeholders. They discuss the differences between basic data analytics and AI, the skills required for each, and how advanced tools can enhance audit processes.
Can you briefly explain the difference between basic data analytics and AI in the context of internal auditing?
Yes, so the basic data analytics is often a response to a specific query. So quite often I'll be asked to go and just say, find duplicate invoices or something where we've been invoiced a certain amount, but the delivery was for less. So it's often an answer to a very specific question. With AI coming in, it is almost searching for other issues that we hadn't thought of. So I think the AI is going to expand the horizon if we use it judiciously. Alternatively, it might take us down rabbit holes that we didn't really want to go. So it could be less focused. So I think that's really the core difference, is the focus on the actual data analytics and what they're trying to achieve.
Would you say that the fundamental skills or knowledge that internal auditors need to have for traditional data analytics are different than with AI? With AI, does it become easier?
It possibly could. So we've just started putting in a tool for our business auditors, which takes away a lot of the pain of extracting the data, knowledge of the systems technically. It allows them to put into almost English terms what queries they want to run, and then they can interpret the results much more easily. So it's taking away a level of technical expertise required. Now, this is deliberate. We've done this because the technical auditors are finding it a bit of a struggle to find the time to do all these technical elements for them. So the more that we go down the technological route where AI is doing the work for us, it's going to take away the requirement for some of the skills. Now, you'll still need the inquiring mind of an auditor to interpret the results, of course, and the methodology will much remain the same, but some of the, how can I put it, the donkey work may well be done.
Gotcha. Can you provide examples of specific audit scenarios where basic analytic tools like Excel or ACL are particularly effective?
Yeah, so actually on almost all the audits I've done, it's been done with Excel and ACL or IDEA or Arbutus. These tools are really effective, especially when you already know what the question is. But the key is to do the data extraction correctly in the first place. So they're very effective and cheap if you get your data extraction, get the exact data you want, because you know what the question is you're trying to ask. If it's more random, you might need a more complicated tool, or if you're putting together much different data sets from more than one system. So I've used things like ClickView in the past, where you need a more complicated system than ACL or IDEA.
How have more advanced tools like Python scripts or Tableau provided additional benefit over those basic tools like ACL and Excel?
Yeah, so we've used things like Python quite a lot. And the reason is it gives us flexibility in what we're trying to achieve. So we can actually write a lot more complex scripts if we start using a programming language ourselves. In a way, something like ACL is like pre-written queries in itself. You can still tailor them and change them, and it's an extraordinarily useful tool. But with Python, it's taking us to another dimension. So we've used it for all kinds of technical reviews where we just go, it'll be too hard actually pass this into ACL and then run the queries we want. So it's depending on the technology. As a general rule, if I go a slight tangent here, I tend to employ people with lots of different skills. I like to recruit people with diverse skills because you don't know what situation you're going to respond to technically. So in the world of IT audit, you need to use the right tool for the right job. Something like Python can be the right tool where ACL isn't the right tool. So you need that flexibility in hand.
You also talked about access to the data. Does your organization let you run Python against the databases directly?
Generally, no. So we're not totally reckless. I am allowed to use native queries in SAP. So I've had to show that I won't bring down the whole database by doing that. So I will do my own data extracts where I can from our ERP. So most of the people in my team were actually quite adept at doing these data queries, and we've done them for many years. If you don't have that expertise, you're going to have to ask somebody to do it for you. To start running queries, it's almost like you're putting in a new application. So you would need somebody to go and test it properly before they would allow you to do it. And that's just too much work, too dangerous. I don't know that they would trust us to do stuff that wasn't under the control of SAP's controls itself. But it's possible on some databases. Generally, we've got them to give us the data, then we run the Python script.
What are some criteria you use to determine which tool is best suited for a particular audit task?
Probably complexity of the query. So I would be looking, say the example I gave of ClickView, I was trying to merge 3 different databases at once. And I just needed a bet. And what occurred to me was not only would it be easier and a more complex tool, oddly enough, but also that would handle the presentation layer back to management better. If you have a really simple tool, you just get a simple result. Whereas ClickView has enabled me to give a model to management that they could drill down into. There was a lot more work involved. So fundamentally, the criteria is how complex is the initial starting point.
Could you share a particularly challenging audit scenario you faced and how data analytics helped overcome it?
I was facing the sack if I got it wrong. And it was a benefits realization review. And these are challenging because quite often in a business case, management will make all kinds of claims what benefits they're going to get from a system. So in this particular instance, they'd made a very tenuous claim to the benefits they got by putting an HR system in place. So I went to go and check that. Now, without the analytics, I couldn't actually possibly prove it one way or another, but I needed all the data. So it was particularly challenging to get all the data from all the previous databases, pull it all into data analytics, and then review it. But it was worth it because I had 100% coverage of what had actually happened. And at the end, I was able to demonstrate the results. Now, politically, this is where another angle of for all auditors is, isn't it? Sometimes the result's not politically palatable. So they kicked off, they fought it tooth and nail, and ended up in the chief exec's office in I can only describe it as an extraordinarily tense meeting, which you've probably been in many yourself.
What was one of the most surprising insights or benefits you gained from using data analytics in an audit?
I think the very first time we tried to do measure best practice. So this is a very tenuous concept, and I was asked basically by the audit committee, have we done best practice? And it's a very tenuous thing. So I had to try and codify what I thought best practice could be. And the results were fantastic. I got a great model to give to management, but the results, actually, we cleaned up our access. We were much more efficient. So tasks were taking less time. We could measure the time taken. We got rid of segregation of duties conflicts, which is a major thing for us in audit, isn't it? To get control over that. And just everything across the board improved. I couldn't believe it the first time I did it, what a great business result it was. And that's what we're about, really, is getting business results.
That's interesting because that's not what I would typically think of with data analytics, but you were able to get that type of data out of SAP in order to...
Yeah. So I think, so I had to go to multiple data sources to do that. But I'm actually always looking for the benefits from data analytics. And I'm always looking to do it where I can't quite get a handle on how I'm going to check a control is working. And if I think, this sounds a bit tenuous and difficult, I go back, well, what is the data going to tell us? Let's go back to the data, because there is a source of truth somewhere. And at that point, then you've got to become like the astronaut, come up with a quick tool, start thinking. You have to start thinking about what your solution is going to be. We're also like the astronauts, aren't we? We're trying to solve problems. We're trying to solve problems.
Yes, we are. Can you provide an example of a pitfall you encountered while using data analytics and how you mitigated it?
First time I forgot to copy the database. I wasn't really thinking, and I didn't take an initial copy of the first extract. So I played around with the first one I got, made a total mess of it, which can easily happen. And then I actually didn't have anything to go back to. So I had to go cap in hand back to the IT guys and go, that extract you did for me? Can you do it again? Because I've made a total mess. But then what was worse was the total mess I made somehow got released. Somebody else got hold of it and then started using the data from my total mess. And I was having to make calls going, no, bring that back. That's not the truth. That's my total mess up of the data. So that was a horrific pitfall. I have never, ever since forgotten to take a copy of the data.
So that leads into what strategies or controls you recommend to mitigate.
Number one, take that. Well, number one, first control is be absolutely clear what you're trying to do. So if you're not doing that, you're already lost. You're just doing data analytics for the sake of it and hoping you're on a fishing trip. But if you're really clear, you will then go and get the data you want. I treat it almost like writing a new application. I go and test that. Does that data come back what I expect it to be? And if I've got access to, say, SAP, I can go back and just check some of the things and just sense check it. If I've written a really particularly tough query, I'll get my colleagues to actually check what I've done. Then we'll go and take a copy instantly, never mess with the original. And every time we do something right, we write down what we have done, and then we take another copy. And so we end up with multiple copies following the journey of what our process has been. So at any stage, somebody can go, you did this. I go, yes, it took it from here to here. and we know why we did it. So that's the kind of control I do over it. You can't be too careful because somewhere down the path it ends up in a fraud sometimes. And you really want to be sure of your facts before you accuse anybody of anything fraudulent, as you probably well know. Yeah.
That's very good advice. How can internal auditors effectively communicate the benefits of data analytics to the organization stakeholders?
Oh, nice, pretty charts. Money. I know those are simplistic answers, but I'm afraid that's probably what I've had to resort to. So I was trying to show in the presentation that these charts work and simple things, color-coded boxes and things like this, because quite often you're going to an audit committee or an exec team who don't really understand what you're talking about. They might say they do, but very quickly they don't. But if you can go, actually, what you're really interested in is we found 20 million. That's a fact. That's a figure. That they can get hold of. So actual facts, which are backed up by 100% coverage, they love that because then they can quote that. Anything that's like traffic lighted, they like that as well. So it's about thinking about what your presentation layer is going to be as well, which is not a great thing for auditors. We're not particularly creative, inventive. I would include myself in this, but a bit of effort put into the presentation layer as well really doesn't go amiss.
Very good. What best practices can you share for integrating data analytics into the internal audit process? Maybe say an internal audit function that doesn't have a savvy IT department or IT audit shop.
First of all, don't be scared. Go for it. A lot of these tools, once you start using them, are going the fancy Excel. So that's the first thing. Somebody actually asked a good question at the end of the session, which was, how do you bake it in? And we start every audit with a planning session, way before the audit started, really. And we will say, does data analytics apply here? Is there some data involved we can look at? And if we do, we go, well, what question would we want? What do we think could be going wrong? Can we actually analyze the data on that? The answer is almost always yes. But you just need to plan well in advance and bake it in. So we baked it into every audit. Is there a requirement here for data analytics? It's just too useful a tool not to use. For people who don't really have the skills, I'd actually say invest in yourself. You can all do it. Everybody's mathematically capable in an audit department. I've almost never met anybody who isn't. So everybody can do it. I really have faith in that. Yeah, and once you see the tool, you go, what was I even scared of?
Yeah. How do you measure the success or impact of data analytic initiatives in your audits?
Well, actually, I'd almost go back to the fact that there's normally a number at the end of it. And that is the beauty of it, is especially when you're presenting to a CFO, they get numbers, don't they? So I'd say a large number of them have ended up in monetary findings. If it's a technical audit, I can actually show the number of things we put right, things like that. Again, we're not actually normally challenged on that, funnily enough. Quite often, really, it's just the fact that we found something. If you present it right, they're happy enough with that. I don't normally have to justify it. Now, if I put in a big spend, the time I used ClickView, it was actually quite an expensive tool, but I needed it to show best practice, and ACL and IDEA weren't going to cut it. But they knew what I was trying to achieve, so I had to explain what the expense was about. At the end, when you give them a model, they don't even ask, what was that all about? So is there a good product at the end?
Caveats or guidance for using AI for data analytics. Would you like to review some of those?
I would. So the very first thing is, by its very nature, the data analytics you're using is sensitive data. Sometimes it's intellectual property, sometimes it's personal data, and it's quite often financial data. The question you're asking yourself is, where is this data going when I apply AI? If it's a cloud model, you have now no idea where you've sent this really sensitive data. We can't just be sending out data and going, I don't even know which country it's gone to. Never mind whose servers it on. Just because I send it to a company like Microsoft, is it their servers? I don't even know if they've got a third party behind that. Who has access to it? What are they using it for? So I've got real concerns about doing this. So before I put AI into anything, and I'm not against AI per se, I'd be saying, know exactly what you're doing with it and where it's going. You need a map of where that data is going. I personally wouldn't use it if it went into the cloud. That's just my personal opinion. Second of all, test the living death out of it. So just like any other application, it's not necessarily right. Just because it's AI doesn't mean it's right. So test it. Put in inputs and outputs and what you expect the answer to be and see if it's correct. So test it like anything else, but I'd really test it to make sure, because if it goes wrong, it can, as we've seen in the media, it can go horribly wrong and it can be embarrassing, if nothing else. But if people are making decisions on this, it's even worse.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Robert.
It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
If you like this podcast, please subscribe and rate us. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also catch other episodes on YouTube or at theiia.org. That's THEIIA.org.